Just a heads up, guys, we are good and live. Let me know when you guys want to go live. You can wait till 12 as planned, but everything's good on the stream.
Well, let's see, we've got about 4 more minutes, don't we?
Yeah, of course. I'm just letting you know that everything's good on the tech side. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Doing great.
Yep. I'm ready.
You guys feeling ready?
Yep.
right, I'm gonna switch this over. You guys are live.
All right. So today is week 31 of our pandemic demonstration, so to speak, for live painting sessions. Each week I try to find something a little bit different, even though, I'm trying not to repeat the same type of thing. Probably next week we'll get back to doing something with the figure in it. But today I found this old snapshot that I did. I was doing a plein air paint out with California Art Club at San Juan Capistrano. God, probably 20 years ago. And I did two paintings I did about four, I think. And while I was there, I obviously took pictures. And so I was just rummaging through some of my old small snapshots, ran across this one and took the little snapshot down, had it blown up to a image that I could see a little bit better. And it's kind of blurry. It's kind of out of focus. It's not clear. We lose a lot of clarity in this area up in here. And what happens, a lot of the lights are really bleached out. So what I'm going to try and do is create a little clarity from this specific image in the painting. And it's really an exercise in beginning to understand what it is you're painting, what is going on. It's also an exercise in editing, because there's a lot of things in here that really don't, like this element right in the foreground here. This element is a display explaining a little bit about the mission. I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to get rid of that. Some of these stakes that come up, things such as this. I kind of like the gift shop sign. I think that adds a little character. There's three little blobs over here, and I go, what the heck? I can see some of the character of the wall, but I don't know what those are, and I don't like them. The other thing that I've noticed is the way that this roof line stops here, and then it looks like there's some skylights. And I think this kind of gets confusing. So I'm going to extend this roof line all the way over. There is also a little bit of a bell-shaped light that is cropped here in the corner. I'm going to get rid of that. I'm not crazy about the way this crops into this corner. So if I include it, which is kind of nice, it's made out of stone, I think I'm going to move it in just a little bit, but I won't let the corner of it come right to the corner. I'll probably let it come in from here. So that kind of gives you an idea of my thinking as I approach this thing. First thing I'm going to do is I made a couple marks: middle mark, quarter mark, middle mark, middle mark. Middle mark, quarter mark, and the same here. It gives me, the format is somewhat similar. I'm not sure it's exactly the same format. This is an 18 by 24, but in essence, I use a lot of these things as kind of a virtual grid. Gives me a rough idea where things go. And if I'm in on site, I will do the same thing. I'll figure out where my edges are and where the centers are, and that kind of helps me compositionally. So we're going to kind of straighten this line out. It's a little bit of an angle. I don't like it. A lot of this foliage that comes in, we're going to look for the bottom line of the roof. Maybe the top, I'm going to raise it just a little bit. Bottom line, maybe about here. And then we've got that space in between before we get the archway. This is, as I think I mentioned, Mission San Juan Capistrano, which is a really, really beautiful mission for anybody that ever gets a chance to go there. And it's been painted by artists, my God, over the past century, probably previously too. So let's get enough of a sketch down where we can start getting our shapes in, because as I've mentioned many times, shapes are really the drawing, and all the lines is kind of indicating where the shapes go. So hopefully you follow me with that idea, that concept. I want to find out about where this is. It seems like it sits about here, about in there. And we want a little bit of space. So that space to me looks like there, looks like about here. Okay. Yeah, let's see, above. Yeah, I think we're about right. And I try not to draw arches like this wonderful curve. One of the things, I know I do this when I try and teach people how to do ellipses. I like to do the top center of it, the sides kind of indicate where and then kind of fill it in, because it'll give me a more symmetrical shape. At this point, we'll get this in. This looks about right. That looks a little low, a little bit high. So I think it's probably more in here. There's a door which sits off center, right about in here. I know I've mentioned this many, many times, but you're dealing with approximations. And until we really start getting some of these shapes in, I'm not going to be able to tell how accurate I am. And I'm sketching with a number 2, by the way. And to number 2, kind of a bright, looks to me like either that or it's a flat that I've kind of whittled down over the years. Okay, now we want to find out where this foliage is. Now, and one of the things we're going to do is we're going to relate it to something. I'm going to relate this, which is kind of where the overall foliage is, to this. So the similar spacing to here to here. So similar spacing from here to here to here. So that feels right. Now, if I look at it also, if that's my center line, how much below that center line is it? It's about that much below. So it should be about in here. All right. And that's where that kind of bush is. There's another bush. We start getting values really close together here, and we're going to separate that as we move along, because that's part of what needs to be clarified in this painting. So this will come in here. There's a bush, and I'm using a little bit of ultramarine and a little bit of my asphaltum. There's a window back in here. There's this wonderful dark archway, and I've got some of this Bougainvillea in the shadow, which is kind of nice. I love to paint that kind of stuff. There's also this little bit of a roof line here, a little bit of a roof line, right about, looks like about that angle. It sits about here. So there's my quarter, probably a little bit more like here. All right. And then at this point above this roof, this Bougainvillea comes down, almost down into this area here. All right. So what we're doing is shapes. We're indicating where these shapes are. How much of the space? That's about right. It's a little bit of activity back in here. Then there's some dark shadow shapes, really beautiful leaf shapes that come down in here. Probably I've got a little bit over down in here. It anchors. We're going to get to the bottom. Oh, it looks like it's about here. I'm going to straighten, it's got an angle, but I'm going to straighten it out a little bit. And then we've got this element, which I said I was going to try and put in. I'm going to move it. It's made out of stone. I kind of like that. And we'll kind of get it so it doesn't crop down into the corner and it doesn't crop too close to this edge. There's a little bit of perspective in it. And that helps. We want to get a little bit of just remember where this kind of spiky foliage is. Down in here, all these are going to be shapes. You know what? I've got that too high. I need to bring it down lower. It's really going to be more like here. All right, because I can just see there's more going on in here. This is probably all I'm going to put down initially to try and get the painting going. Again, I'm going to start with something, one of these giant gesso brushes. And first thing I think I'm going to do is get some anchoring in there. Anchoring meaning I'm going to use some of these darks. So I'm going to take a little bit of blue, a little bit of asphaltum. I never like to go all the way to my darkest dark initially. So I'm going to add just a flavor of white to that so that it doesn't go quite as dark. So it gives me a little bit of room if I want to go darker. And I want it very neutral. And I use a lot of terp in it because I want it to go down easily. In other words, I want to be able to just push it down real fast. And the reason I'm using terp as opposed to other mediums, is it'll allow me to spread that. And when I say terp, I mean Gamsol. I'm gonna, as I'm painting here, I will kind of give you an idea as to my palette, which is pretty similar every week. I think this week I added a little bit of quinacridone red in here because of the Bougainvillea. It'll give me a better red for the Bougainvillea than just pure alizarin. Let me see if I added any other colors. I have white, Naples yellow white. I have a little bit of yellow. It's yellow Hansa. It's not the CAD. Just because I have a large tube of it, and I don't need an intense yellow. I just need a good yellow. So we're getting the dark, kind of some of the leaves in here where they're going to go. Some other little dark area back here a little bit. Just kind of get it in, and then it goes into shadow. And we want to kind of, what you want to do in the beginning is unify your shadows. Don't make every shadow a whole separate area. I mean, particularly if you're working rather quickly, but I like to unify them, period. So this shadow on the foliage is right here. Now, again, I think I've mentioned it before, but I also, this fall, I have it way too far over. See, it's probably about here, which I don't mind because I kind of, it gets darker down at the base of this anyway. So I'm taking a little bit of green into the color I was using and a little bit of raw sienna. And we're going to kind of, whoops, I want to go a little lighter. So I'm going to use ochre instead of the raw sienna. It'll lighten it up a little bit, maybe even a little Naples yellow light along with the green. I still want the kind of green flavor.
Lorella has a great question about, do you ever think of the rule of thirds or the golden mean principle when you're laying out your compositions?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. The rule of thirds is pretty much just a simplification of the golden section. But yes. And I looked at this to see if it was, if I had that. The door hits about in a third. The overall central part of the Bougainvillea hits in about a third. The top of this hits in about a third. The top of the, so there's some nice things already begin to happening. And as I lay it out, I do think about that. That's a great comment, great question. I try not to put anything smack dab in the center, unless I'm doing a portrait of someone, obviously. Just compositionally. So we're just kind of laying stuff in now. While we got these darks, see, look how cool and contemporary I am here up here, you guys. I allow drips to happen. I'm going to get rid of them now. Just because I don't want them. I may want to darken that. Hopefully that's going to absorb. I'm working on a piece of gessoed hardboard with a little bit of an acrylic tone onto it. And a lot of times it'll absorb the colors a little quicker. And I can actually, in other words, the paint, I won't say it's thoroughly dry, but even in the session that I'm painting in, it'll set up enough where I can paint over it. So if you see me rub like this, I'm rubbing it in. I'm doing that because I don't want the paint wet and soppy. I want it dry. And the other way to think of it is it goes back to the old thick or thin to thick or lean to fat, meaning in the beginning, it's a lot leaner. I don't have as much, so I'm using more terp than I am, say, fat, which would be oil. So I'm not using that in the beginning. Let's get this dark up in here. I want to get all this, I want to start unifying. I can see right now I'm separating too much. I'm worried too much about where things sit instead of pushing them all together. Be sloppy, be free, particularly in the beginning. It doesn't matter how it starts. Or as I like to say, the finish should be better than the beginning. Little ridiculous words of wisdom that I like to throw out to you guys every now and then. And if you think about it, I'm not saying anything that's, wow, is that, way out there. It's pretty obvious. I mean, obviously you want the finish to look better. When you first put strokes down, it's pretty much, they're just the abstract marks, and they really start making more sense. And I think you guys have seen this as we approach completion. So another comment that I use quite often is, keep in mind this is another, you're always setting up for the next stage. Everything is a setup for what comes after. And it's not until you're putting your final strokes down that you're really making a completed, finished statement. Now, this is going to come down here. There's going to be something coming down here. But we also want to catch that little, I got it a little too wide. Which doesn't matter a lot. It's nice and thin. I like that. I like that. It's almost slightly transparent. Now, if you look at the roof above it, it's kind of a gray tile, and it's tile that has been weathered. So it even has a coolness to it, a little bit of a blue character. So I'm going to try and start it with this. Maybe I went a little too blue. I like it, but I just added a touch of red to it. And we're going to keep it in this range right in here. And I don't worry about how neat the edges are. We don't worry. We see the tile as a unit. You don't want to see them as separate tiles at this point. If I have time, which I hopefully will, I'll be able to go in and clarify some of those and make it feel a little bit more like tile. At this stage, I just want the value and the color to be basically where I want it to be at the end. So that feels pretty good. Above that, there's a very light area. Now, I'm going to go back and talk a little bit about my palette because I laid a new color out. I laid a warm white by Gamblin. It has just a touch of yellow. It's not necessary. It is an unnecessary color. But whenever I go to the art store, I go, oh, I got to have that. I'm one of those kind of ridiculous people. So I bought some warm white. Now, I don't have to mix anything with it because it's going to end up almost that color. And now that I see it, it needs a touch of ochre into it. So and that's what I added, a little bit of ochre into that. So we're going to I kind of like that clumsy stroke, the freedom of that. Let's kind of lose an edge and bring it over here. There's a dryness to that stroke, which is really kind of interesting, I find. I love paint different stroke characteristics as you're painting. Probably one of the things that interests me more than anything is the character of paint strokes and the use of those strokes to convey real images. All right, so this is going to be the Bougainvillea in here, right? So we want this to go back behind it. We want to get this little piece of red in there, and there's also some real nice dappled light in there. If I have time, we'll get into it. It's got a lot of interesting things going on in this image. I'm going to take some burnt sienna. Let's see, this I think might be a little too strong. That is, kill it with a little blue. There we go, a little bit more. I've said about 3 times I was going to tell you my palette, and I obviously have it. So let me run through it real quick as I'm laying this in. I have, like I said, I laid in a warm white. Then I've got my standard that I like to use, the radiant white. Yellow, Hansa, Naples yellow light, yellow ochre. I have a cad orange there. I don't know if I'm going to need it. I just happen to have it there. Then I have a cad red hue. I have a alizarin crimson and the quinacridine red, which is a permanent alizarin. A lot of times they refer to it as permanent alizarin crimson. Very often it'll be referred to in that regard. So that is there. Then I have ultramarine blue, sap green, and asphaltum. Along with that, I threw in a little bit of, I just had it on my palette, so because I was doing another painting, so I didn't get rid of it, but I have some raw sienna and some burnt sienna laid out. So there we've got this kind of thing coming in. We'll kind of get it to blend a little bit. Okay. Let's get the building in. There's a shadow on the building, some nice dapple light. I'm going to try and paint those shadowed areas first. And I can use either one of my whites. And I'm going to mix it, and I'm going to keep it kind of cool. It's kind of neutral. It is on the cool side, though. So it has a lot of blue in it. Let's see what that ends up. Nope, don't like it. I need more blue and more asphaltum. So it doesn't, it's blue, but it's not, well, that feels better. Now, I got to remember, that is not white. All right, so sometimes you put a stroke down and you're not painting on white and you think it's lighter than it is. And then later on, when you start pushing your brighter lights, it's not as light as you thought. So we get a little bit of it there. And I like to vary it a little bit. So I'm going to make it maybe a little violet in some cases. And every time I add a different color, it tends to begin to add a little bit more interest and character to that area. So we're going to go there. Down in here, I see some. Down here. This whole area. I can even go a little darker now. I can go take more blue into it and a little bit more asphalt and go just a tad dark right into the same color I was mixing. We're going to go right up more asphalt and more blue. I'm just pushing it back to the value I think it needs to be. And I see a lot of warm. I just caught it. So I just picked up some red and we'll kind of push these colors. Combination asphaltum, blue, white, and red.
That's kind of,
We're going to push them up in here. And the reason we want it is I don't want it to be a color, one color. It needs to have, it's more than one color. It's got a lot of other colors in it. Okay, it's looking okay. Kind of like what's happening. And again, if I get this in wrong, it doesn't matter because this is a weathered old building. Not quite. There's a little brickwork coming through right in here. It's warm, but it's not real warm down.
it's kind
So
of blocking a little, sorry.
now one of the things that I want to mention is this under. A lot of people think it's cold. It's very warm. What happens is when you have two light sources, you have sunlight and skylight. Sunlight is really more prominent than skylight. So that's why this is cool. So it's blocking the sunlight, but the skylight can still get to it. As it goes underneath, it's pretty hard for skylight to get back, sneak its way back in there. Therefore, it's dark, absent of the warmth. I mean, absent of the cool that skylight would add to it. So we're going to keep it more in the burnt sienna area. And we're going to push it back about here. And if it's too strong, I just add a little blue to it. And we dull it down a little bit. But I like the warmth. And I don't mind if I go a little warmer than I need to. Now, as it goes down, I can feel more warmth happen. So I'm adding more raw sienna into that, and we'll just see what happens. That's okay. Let's get it. Let's start it with that. I also see a little bit more cool occur over in this area. Sometimes you're not going to be able to figure out exactly why that's happening. You just have to react to what you see. If it's warm, push it that way. The thing of it is, if you just paint it like a dull, dark shape, it's not going to have the interest and character that it would if you actually painted it with some of the color nuances. Color nuances is something that we can get into the longer we work on a painting. The longer you work, you can go back and you can pronounce nuances a lot more than you might in just one pass. That's why in many instances I referred to passes. You do passes over a painting. Each time you pass over, you discover more things. As you discover more things, you add them in. That adds more of a richness to your painting. So it isn't one-dimensional. It isn't just kind of a boring, a flat yellow color, a flat blue color. There are colors within colors. I should say there are color variations within colors. And I think that's important for everybody to kind of start to get used to, is to find those variations. That happens once you establish the basic value structure of your painting, and you have the opportunity to look back into it, you will begin to see those variations. The key is, don't see them too soon. See them at the right time. It sounds weird, but it goes back to a line that I once again like to use. You have to learn how to see things in the proper order. If you see too much detail too quick and you put it in there, you're going to sacrifice something else. So,
Can you talk about the brands of paint that you like the best? I said
Gamblin. I've talked about that many
Gamblin.
times. I use primarily Gamblin paints. I use some Dick Blick, and every now and then I have some old Utrecht paints, and some Winsor Newtons, but primarily I use Gamblin. I'm not doing a sales pitch for Gamblin. It's like brushes. I like rosemary brushes. So everybody gets, their favorite brand of paint, their favorite colors, and there isn't an exact perfection. What I like, you might not like. What you like, I might not like. I have good example is I have 2 or 3 friends that love brights. I'm not crazy about bright brushes. I'll use them for drawing, but other than that, I'm not a big fan of them. But I do know artists that are great artists. I don't mean pretty good artists. I mean terrific artists that they love them. So what works for one may not work for all. That's one of the things that makes art interesting, is that there's not a one size fits all in terms of brushes, in terms of mediums, in terms of anything.
I'm wondering if I need to move this a little, because
I'm going to start to get a little bit of light in here. I want some interest in that light. One of the problems with photographs is if it shows more interest or refinement in the shadows, it generally will sacrifice it in the lights. If it shows it more in the lights, it will sacrifice it in the shadows. If you are on location, you have the opportunity to look into the shadow and into the light. Therefore, you see more. And so you have to understand that as you begin to paint, because what happens otherwise is you simplify things and you say, well, that's a light color. It is a light color, but it's not one light color. To me, it's like painting rocks. You can't paint rocks a color. Rocks are a multitude of colors. Fields of green grass or of weeds are a multitude. It's not as refined as just getting one color down. So don't be afraid to intermix and mix colors. And sometimes mixed color maybe you don't think works, and you might surprise yourself.
sometimes you mix right on the
I mix right on many times.
painting.
Yeah, I do. The faster I work, and I'll tell you what, I used to have this idea that you mix the perfect color and you lay down the perfect stroke. Well, you're going to drive yourself crazy if you try and do that, because you're never going to get the perfect color. You spend forever getting the perfect color, and until you get other colors down, you don't know that that's the perfect color. Every color you put down is relative. It's not one. It's not one size fits all. It's relative. So if I were painting this and I had a good friend of mine alongside of me painting this, we're in the same spot, we may see it differently. Or I like to say, not see it differently, we may interpret it differently. Because what we're doing as artists is we're always interpreting. We're not depicting an exactness, we're interpreting. So you can see I'm starting to give some color inferences into this. So those shadows are not one color and the lights aren't one color. And I can go back forever and play with that. That's one of the joys that I enjoy on longer paintings, is being able to go back and manipulate color, manipulate value, and manipulate paint texture. All those three things. For me, that's what painting's all about, those elements. You know, now you can start thinking like that once you get to the point where you actually can paint what you see. Initially, I understand when you're first learning, it's hard enough just to paint what you see. I mean, that itself is a problem. And once you kind of get that down, you can get your proportions and you can get, your perspective, all those types of things down. Then is when you can start really looking for all these nuances. And that's just what I'm describing pretty much is the growth of an artist. That's just what happens as artists grow and become more proficient in their decision making and more aware of the subjects that they're painting. And they become more familiar with the way paint goes down. That's the other thing. Learning how to make paint go down and do what you want it to do. To me, that's every bit as difficult as learning how to see things correctly and seeing things at the correct time. So I want to put some more textures. It's darker down in here. Okay, I'm starting to get that. I don't want to dwell too long on that. I do want to get the top of this door, which is kind of cool. It's a little lighter than that. So there we go. That's going to be the top of that door. And then it goes, because it's kind of in shadow there. A little cooler maybe right in here. And then as it works its way down into light. Remember, this is not white. So which means I have a long way to go before I get light, before I get really light. For example, there's that light. I threw some more Naples into it because I felt like I was getting too strong. And then that light goes up and illuminates a couple parts of the door. Right here, right in the door, down in here, down here, and it kind of fuzzes across until we get down right about here. And then there's a couple of pieces of dappled light, not quite as strong because it's weaker at this point, but it happens right in here and on the wall. And maybe down on the side here. And so we're starting to get, I hope what you're beginning to see is this manipulation of all these areas going on. Now, it gets quite light and bright. And so I took Naples yellow and I took white, and I'm just going to, on this side of the window, I'm going to get some lights back in here. Okay. And we'll take that same color and put it here. Maybe a little, I want to cool it just a touch so it doesn't come out quite as strong. And I want to look right about the top of the door. Right about there. And on the other side, a little cooler. It's not as bright, but it goes straight across. So we want it right here. Right about there. Just a quick indication and a little bit of this dappled light just beginning to come through. See, is there any more over here? I want to hit maybe a little bit in here. And it's got some age kind of to the actual surface. So it's a color change. This is not a light thing. That's actually a color change, much the same as up in here, where it's more age up in here. This is the kind of stuff that you work if you have the time to work it. I'm gonna leave it alone. I want to, again, I know my own tendencies and I know I'm working for a time frame. And so I don't want to dwell on some of these areas that I might if I were working much, much longer. But since I'm not, I'm about 30 minutes into it. Now, I was hoping I was going to be further at 30 minutes into it, just so you guys know. I was hoping I'd have most of it laid in because I've dwelled a lot in this probably unnecessarily. So we're going to get a little bit of this foliage in here, kind of start with a sap and a Naples. Let's see what happens with those two colors. Okay, a little ochre into that color. Want a little warmer and a little more sap. I don't want to go quite that light that fast. And then we're going to just start and kind of push some of this stuff around here. More green. So I just took more green into the same color I was using. We're just bringing it up in here. Bring it up.
So Linnea has an interesting comment that she has problems seeing or judging what's warm and cool, not obvious things, but sections, and then trying to mix the colors. Guessing that's where experience and years of painting.
Yeah, you know what you have to do?
Exaggerate.
Guess. Go ahead. Don't be afraid to be wrong. Guess. Make your judgment. Don't make your judgment immediately. If you see more cool into an area, put it in later. You don't have to get it all. Everything doesn't have to be in there initially. You're setting, again, if you keep, probably the most important thing I said today is you're setting up for the next stage. That's probably the most important. If you come away from this little session that I'm doing with one tidbit of information, that would be the one. Everything you're doing is a setup for the next stage, which means it took me a long time to learn this, everybody, just so I'm no genius when it comes to this stuff. I learned things the hard way. I think that's why when I was first working, it would take me so long to get to complete an illustration or a painting, because I was so concerned with how it looked at that stage that I was working at that moment. And I didn't realize that was just that stage. That wasn't the finished piece. And I still had time and areas that I could move around in and make it better. Go ahead. And so once I learned how to be wrong, and then gained the confidence to be able to go back and make it right, that was a huge. And the only thing I could ever advise to anybody with that regard is to just plow ahead like you know what you're doing. Again, there's that ridiculous statement that I probably overuse, but plow ahead like you know what you're doing, but also be aware that you may not be right. That's why I use that phrase, paint like you know what you're doing and assume you're wrong. Don't assume you're right, because you're not going to really know that for a while. So that probably is what you're experiencing, is you're trying to find everything right. You discover things as you continue painting, because you look deeper into what it is you're painting. Whether you're painting on location, you look deeper into those shadows of the trees. You look deeper into something. But as you're initially starting it, you're just getting the basic shapes and that basic essence of whatever the subject is you're painting. You're not painting the refinement. By trying to paint refinement too soon, you lose a lot. You lose energy, you lose character, you lose focus, because I think you focus too much on the refinement part of it and not on the overall color and value of it, which is really what really starts to make it work. It's that color and value. You don't get the color and value right, color, value, shape, color, value, shape. Say that over and over. Once you start getting good at that, then you can start worrying about paint characteristics. Do I have thick enough paint? Do I have thin enough paint? All that stuff. But that doesn't matter if you can't get the shape, which is drawing. So when I use the word shape, in essence, I mean drawing. Shape, value, color. Those keys. And if you're going to be wrong on one, be a little bit wrong on the color. Don't be wrong on the value. Don't be wrong on the shape. Okay, keep moving. I got to get more of that in there. So I'm going to I got yellow, Naples yellow, and I mix this back into that green I was using. And we're going to put it, got to go lighter. Let's take that warm white and mix it in. And a little bit more yellow, because I do want to distinguish a little bit, and a little bit more green. I'm just looking at as I lay that stroke down, I'm reading values, but I got to get the windows in, so I don't want to over refine this. If I over refine it, then what happens? I got to mess it up. And there's really some beautiful green. So I'm gonna go back to the sap right in here. Oh, that's pretty good. A little bit more green, maybe a little blue in it. Just by pushing, we're not trying to, we're just capturing the kind of feeling of that bush, not the exactness of it. If I do, I'll spend an hour in that one area, as many of you probably have found. It's very easy. Keep moving throughout the piece. Don't dwell too long at any one spot. There's a shadow. That's what I'm painting back. A little bit more shadow right in here. So while I've got that color in the brush, why not use it? A lot of color and texture variations up in here. So I want to capture as many as I can, as simply as I can. A couple of reasons. One, we don't want to call too much attention to it. And two, I'm trying to paint this as if I were on location. And if I were on location, I probably wouldn't go extremely refined in it because I wouldn't have the time. Now there's a big light area. It looks like a rock. I don't know if I'm going to put that in there. I think I'm going to paint the feeling of that bush right here. The way it kind of works its way. It's about there. I was trying to see it. I have it in the right spot. Yeah, I've got it almost in the right spot. Probably comes over here a little bit more. And there's some darks back in here in order to get that one. I don't know what those are called. I'm not a. Do you know what they're called? These things. It's spikes. I'm not sure what they're called. It doesn't matter, truthfully.
I don't know.
It doesn't matter what they're called.
They're kind of like deserty.
Yeah, they are deserty. Very, very much so.
No, the official name.
They're deserty plants.
Terrible. We should know.
That's okay. I just paint what they look like. I don't have to know the exact name. I do things and I mean, even our son, he knows this stuff. Right and left, he can tell you what bird you're painting, what kind of tree, whether that tree grows in a specific area, how much water it needs. It scares the heck out of me when I hear this stuff because it just makes me realize how little I know.
Agave? That's Laurel mentioned, maybe?
Is that what it is?
I
Very much. There could be. Oh, there's a nice green. That's sap green and white, by the way. That's all that is. It's got a real rich color to it, and it's not light. I mixed a little bit more ultramarine into it because I see a blue-green as it goes down. Now, where does it go down to? Right about here. So just kind of get it in there. This is some of the stuff in the shade. There's some more ultramarine into that color. Bring it up above. This is the fun stuff. The work's going to come in a little while. Hopefully it's starting to make a little sense. We're going to get a little bit of, I think I'll put the darks in under the Bougainvillea. They tend to feel very brown. So I used a little bit of burnt sienna and we're going to come off this and then we're just going to kind of play around. It's so busy and so erratic that you really can't tell, but I need a substance underneath this before I put the bright color on. Back in this shadow, there's a little bit of a light area right there. Okay. And it's got that light post, which we'll put in a little bit, but I don't want to dwell on it too much. Do want to get more of whatever the underpinnings of the Bougainvillea is. We're going to paint the Bougainvillea in at about 2 to 3 different values. And I do want to get some of it up in this area. I'm going to need to switch over another brush in a little bit. I'm going to take a brown and sap green together. And I'm going to take a little bit of terp, not much, a little bit. And I'm going to come into the shadow. And I'm going to go a little darker than I had initially. I'm going to overlap in here. I know I'm going to come over it later. And we're going to work it kind of down into this area. So it just begins to come out. Let's see, was it work all the way down about in here too? So this is, that's that word I've used many times. It's kind of placeholder. I know that that's basically where I want it. And there's more bush up in here. And there's a little bit of light coming through. That's kind of a nice little touch there. I love that little aspect, right? Ochre, it's almost ochre, and we're going to put it right here. Just that little piece of light there. Okay. I see a similar color to that, as long as I've got it right there. Leave it alone. Talking to myself, not talking to you. Leave it alone. Okay. Some clarity. Let's get a little bit of the Bougainvillea going on so we start to get the overall color feel. I think before I do, I'm going to lay some of these greens and browns in right in here. So let's take that green, mix it with a little Naples, and see what we end up with. Stronger. I'm going to go darker. Green, add a little brown to the green too. And we're painting right through this thing here. So we're just kind of getting some of those. Again, we're going to bring lights. It's almost like we're going to turn the light on. I'm setting up darks and midtones so that I can turn the lights on. A little bit more green as it moves over here. So I'm burying these greens quite often. Every time you see me put my brush down, what I'm actually doing is changing the green. Sometimes warmer, sometimes cooler. It's how I see it, and I'm reading it initially. I'm not sitting there and analyzing it. If I see it go a little warm, I'm going to warm. If I see it a little cool, I go a little cool. Again, and this is to answer the question that was asked much earlier. What that affords me to do is to make a decision later how close I am. And then I add whatever that variation is into it. If it's a warmer variation, if it's a darker variation, I add that in, but I don't do it initially. Okay. And if I see an area broken up, as I do in here, there's a lot going on. As it goes up, it gets lighter. There is a branch right there. It's almost, I almost lost it there. And there's a little bit that comes out there. And then there's some darks, warm darks. So I just took that color and added right up in here. And for the warm, I have kind of I'm just mixing a little bit of a burnt sienna into a pot of kind of dark that I already have mixed up. So I'm not dwelling on too much on it, but I do want that variation. A little bit more green over here. A little bit maybe here. Okay. So the busyness of the design is really what I'm going for. Now I'm going to see if I can get some of that Bougainvillea in there. And I know it's not going to be the final thing. So I'm going to take the quinacridone red, add a little bit of, holy smoke. I'll tell you what I was saying that about. Look at that color. Wow. Okay. I don't want it quite that bright yet. I do want to finish. So I'm going to throw maybe some alizarin, which is not quite as, and we're going to start back in here. Oh, that's good. That leaves me room to get brighter and lighter. So we're going to kind of put this up in here where we see it, above the roof line. Now I'm going to take that same color and I'm going to add brown to it. I'll show you what we're going to do here. I'm going to bring it back over into the shadow because I see little pieces of it. And what that's going to allow me to do is that's going to allow this to be in the, see, now it's I have it too bright. So I'm going to throw a little bit more blue so it goes more of a violet, it stays in shadow. Down here. And you can make it, you can oversaturate it. You can do it in more than one spot because this is where you're kind of playing designer. You get to be the designer of this piece. And if you want, say, geez, I wish that, think about it. If you're a gardener, I'm not, but if you are, you're saying, man, I wish that plant would come over and overlap that. Well, you know what? You're an artist, so do it. Make it do it. Make that happen. Okay. So let's get ready. Let's go back to that first quinacridine I had. That first reddish color, which is kind of in here. And let's kind of mass it in. Bring it in over here. I got to move faster because I want to be in about 10 minutes. I'd like to have everything laid in, so it gives me 30 minutes to go back and clarify things. As I was stating, was my whole goal in this piece was to keep it somewhat clarified. Now I want this to come over and overlap that. And we want a little of it kind of coming out in there and up, overlapping that roof, which I need to add some detail in. And we'll just kind of let this skip its way down in here and add a little bit of fun character and texture. So very quickly begin to get the kind of feeling of what's going on with that Bougainvillea. I don't want to spend too long on it. That's why I use that big brush. All right, let's go back and start to clarify some of the stuff. I've just about got the whole thing laid in. Let's get a little bit of the ground plane down at the very bottom. I see a lot of dark brown, gray, brown, violet color right about in here. And it works its way back into the shadow.
Laura wants to know if you varnish all of these finished paintings later on.
Eventually, you know, if I think that it's worth it, yeah. I've just got a pile of them sitting around right now. 31 of them, 30 of them to be exact. Right now, no, I haven't varnished any of them. You know, I don't want to go back on any of these because I want them to stay what they were intended to be, is, you know, a 90-minute painting, basically, 90-minute plus, because I usually go back and work about 15 minutes on these things afterwards. So, I try not to go back and overdo it and keep a lot of the spontaneity. It's one of the things that I like about a lot of these things is there's a nice spontaneity. So we have a little of that dappled light on the ground. I'm going to paint in this element. You know, I think I'm going to get rid of that. I just don't like that piece in the corner. I'm going to get rid of it.
What piece in the corner?
This little element that I left here. So we're going to paint it out.
Oh.
And what we're going to do is let the bushes come over. It's not too hard to fake. I didn't like it. For some reason, it bothered me. I know I eliminated a lot of the other foreground stuff, and I thought I would keep that, but much the same as I do when I'm painting, sometimes I'll go, you know, why am I doing that? I'm doing it because it's there, not because it's good. Ooh, I like that. Did you hear what I just said?
No.
I was doing it because it's there, not because it's good.
How long do you usually wait to varnish a painting?
Well, you're supposed to wait till it's dry. And, you know, there's different theories as to when a painting is dry. One of the theories is if you can take a wet rag, you can take a rag, put a little turp on it and rub it, and a lot of color comes off, it's still too wet. That's one of the theories. The other theory is wait 3 to 6 months, depending on how thick you paint. And then I use something that I think they're discontinuing, which is really terrible because I love this stuff. And if anybody out there has any influence with the Krylon people, tell them to please go back and reinstitute, if they've already, something called quick dry, which I use. I love it. It's something that, what I've been told, I hope I'm right, is you can actually, while your painting is still relatively wet, it was something that I understood was developed by conservators, simply so that artists can work on paintings. And what it does is it's like a retouch varnish. A retouch varnish you can use while your painting is still wet. And this quick dry just had a nice finish to it. So I used it a lot on my paintings. And I still have 3 cans of it left. But from what this art store that I shop at, they told me they were discontinuing it. And so the last time I went in, I was going to get a can. And she goes, no, I'm going to give you 3. I said, why? And she said, because we're not getting any more of this. So in any event, let's keep going. I've got a rosemary number 6 here, just so you guys are wondering.
Just
Number 4, excuse me. And I was just clarifying some of this stuff up in here. I want to clarify this and then work my way down. This I can be more abstract with than anything in the painting. I'm aware of that. I know that that'll work if I do that. So I'm going to keep that in mind as I move around here. So I'm going to try and give some cleaner edges to things. For that, I might use my one of my sticks. So what I can do is I can lay it down and come in and put the roof line in just like that, just with one simple stroke. That's it. I don't want to go any further than that.
Laurel wants to know, do you absolutely have to varnish? Just getting back to varnish.
I think you do. You don't absolutely. No, there's no one holding a gun to your head and saying you have to varnish. But varnishing, what it does more than anything is it enhances your colors. Your colors tend to die after a period of time, meaning dull out, particularly your darks. One thing that I've noticed is sometimes, I'm trying to get a nice dark here, by the way, you guys. One thing that I've noticed is if I can get a, it's working. So if I can get if I take an old painting and look at it and realize that, whoa, it's just dying, something's in it wrong. And all of a sudden, and I've learned this through, all of a sudden you varnish it and all the life that it had as a painting when you were first doing it, the luster comes back. And so that's why, to me, that's why you varnish. You don't varnish for any other reason. You don't varnish to give it a gloss. If you like gloss, great. I prefer satin. I don't like it. I don't necessarily like matte, although when I was illustrating and I did some of my latter illustrations in oils, I very often used a matte varnish for the sake of how it would photograph. But generally I use a satin. I got to indicate a little bit of something in here. A little bit of perspective. You got to get your perspective. Okay. Gonna leave it alone. It's a little stronger than I wanted, but I'm gonna leave it alone. I just don't want to spend that much time on it right now. Now we're gonna put the underside of this in, and it's pretty red and rustic right about here. Oh, it's way too red. I got some of my what do you call it, mixed into it, accredited. So we're gonna go kind of dark, right? Whoops, not wet enough. That's wet enough. It's making, so I've got an edge there now. And if I want to strengthen that edge, which I think I do, I'm gonna go a little darker. Try and get my arm out of your way so you can see what the hell I'm doing here.
Kind of blocking, but they'll see it after you're done.
Okay, and we got a little dark snap in here, and it's not that neat. The bottom of this is kind of cruddied up a little bit because of age. So we kind of, even though it's why I kind of wanted to use a brush like this. But if we go to the top part of it, we're going to go back to kind of this bluish drab color. I don't care if it matches exactly. I want the value to be right. That's about right. A little bit more blue than I want. Maybe I'll put a little bit more warmth into it, but we're going to set it right on top there. If I work small, very often I do this stuff freehand. The larger I work, the more I will tend to use sometimes and if I'm on location, very often what I use is another brush. I just grab it, whatever I have, and use that if I need it. Sometimes, I'll try to do it freehand, and if it really looks crappy, then I'll come in and use a cheating tool, as I like to think of it. Okay. And a little bit of blue, right? As it goes into shadow, it gets quite blue. So I added a lot of blue to that color. Obviously not enough.
Sorry, it's kind of blocking. But...
There. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry if I'm blocking. It's the only way I could get that hand up there. Now I can go back and paint, so hopefully you can see what the hell I'm doing. So we're kind of crudding it up a little bit, adding a little bit more texture, because I swear I'd really like to have time at the end to add a lot of texture into that wall. I just don't know if I'm going to have it. So I'm going to add as much as I can in right now. Don't like working with that little brush either, but it's what I have in my hand. Okay. So it's coming together. These are a little too dark. I'm just going to clean a brush and just kind of go over it so it isn't quite as dark. Maybe it'll diffuse it a little bit.
That works.
It feels better to me. They were just too strong. Okay. I want the feeling of it there, but I don't want the refinement of it there. And as it goes in here, now I've got to bring more of that tree down. I've got to bring more, and I need my big brush for that because I got to move fast. So we're going to take my, I need a clean rag. I kind of messed up that rag to the point where I can't use it. All right, I'm going to take and mix some greens, and we're going to start to bring, that's too much light on that, on my brush at the time. So that's better. And we want to bring it down in here, underneath. It comes down and overlaps. A little bit, dull that green out with a little brown. It was feeling a little too strong for me. And we want it to kind of overlap down here. Move it up into the shadows. Keep my greens going over here the way they were. Blue, green, green, whatever. Because we're going to add some white to it. A little bit of yellow, maybe that color. As I said, I remix my greens a lot. I probably, truthfully, remix greens more than any other color.
Why?
Because in nature, it looks wrong. I can't. That's the word I'm looking for. It looks wrong if you just do a green. It is not. Nothing is that clear cut when it comes to greens. It's So I mixed. I want it darker so it stands out. It comes down right about here, right about there, and a little bit more green into it. And you don't want to overpick this. By that I mean use a little tiny brush and pick it to death where everything is you're painting every little frond, every little leaf. You don't want to do that. Okay, so now let's add the brighter greens in there. We're going to go with the Naples, the yellow. Oh, a lot of yellow, and maybe a little medium. And just a touch of green. I already have green in my brush, and let's see what happens. That's not bad. A little more yellow. And a little more medium, because I want it to sit on there comfortably. It's probably a little brighter than I want first. I want it to end up there. So I added a little bit more green in it. And as I'm painting on the color, I'm actually picking up more green and color. A little bit coming in from here. Little blue green in here, so we mix. Sometimes you lay that whole brush down and you get a really interesting stroke. Sometimes you just use the tip. Like right now, the tip, here's the whole brush. A little bit of light here. If I have time, I will add more light. Comes all the way down here, or two right about in here. And I actually see some siennas in there too, some warmer colors. So it's not a one size fits all type of a green. And down at the very base, a little bit of light filters in and begins to affect some of the leaves, some of the foliage, I should say, at the bottom. Okay, let's leave that alone. Let's move back over into this area. We're going to go into I added Naples yellow to the same color I was just using, by the way. Here's what I'm going to do. And maybe a little warm white and some medium. And before I finalize this, there are little light areas happening back in here. Light, and it's kind of a yellow green.
Is that from the building or the plant?
This is foliage. It's not the building. It's foliage. Foliage sneaks back here. And up here. More yellow. Feels like it needs more yellow, more color. You see it right up in here.
Earl wants to know if you ever scrape your used paint together and use mud for grays.
Yep, I do. You know what they have? I don't have any, but you can get tubes. You can get tubes, and what they are paint tubes that may not be this big, but they open at the end. So they're wide open, and you just take your paint and scoop it in and then crimp the edge, and you can actually mix up, save some of your old paint and use it just as an additional color.
Or tone your canvas.
Huh?
Or tone your canvas.
Or tone. I don't tone my canvases generally with oil unless I already have oil on it. I generally tone it with acrylics. I'm just used to it. Occasionally I will, if I want a certain kind of texture, I may tone my canvas with oil, even with a palette knife. Generally I don't. I generally use acrylic, and it's just something I've grown accustomed to. That's all it is. It's not a right or wrong type of a thing. It's just you get a feel for what that surface is like. I know people that don't like acrylic grounds at all. I'm used to it, so for me, it's not a big deal.
So it looks like Linnea said that Jerry's Artorama has the Krylon Quick Dry.
Do they have it?
That's what you just
Son of a gun.
So I'll look it up.
Because I talked to someone recently and they tried to order it. And they, Bill Bond, a friend of mine, and he said he couldn't find it.
Okay.
So if they've got it, that's great.
I'll look it up. Thank you.
I've known some people contact Krylon to try and find it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It was I mean, I would buy 3 or 4 cans at a time just to have around. Okay, now I wiped out too much of that, which is okay. I need to come over it one more time. Now I'm going to put in my brighter lights on some of this stuff down in here. A little bit more color, a little more yellow, a little bit of green. Let's see what happens, right? Let's start right in here. And then go in here. More green. Paint's getting real dry. I can feel it, so I'm adding some oil. When the paint starts feeling really dry, unless I want a real dry stroke, which occasionally I do, then what I will do is add in more medium. Probably going to go over a little bit. I'm about 5 after, so I would like to get this thing complete. So I might go a little bit over, you guys. I'm going to try and get it done in the next whatever. Some more green and some more yellow. I want it to stand out. Right now, it's everything back in here is just becoming one. Well, there's a great light area that I want to hit right here against this wall.
What medium are you using right now?
Safflower oil. Dragging some of this over the wet paint to kind of move it into the green area. We want to get all these variations of greens. So I'm throwing ochre into it at times. If I just see it lean away, then I just pick up that color and use it. And later on, if it doesn't feel right, I'll change it. And that goes kind of a little bit back to what the question that we had earlier about trying to mix the right color and the right warm, the right cool. I'm warmer than I need to be right here. I can tell you right now, but I might like it. I actually might like it when I'm done with it. I mean, I might say, geez, glad I threw that extra warm in there. And if I don't like it, I'll change it.
you sometimes just exaggerate it?
Yep. That's a good point. Sometimes you exaggerate it because if you don't know, you push it a little bit further and you can always bring it back in, so to speak. I think I'm gonna have to lay out more green. I'm almost out of my green.
Where is it?
It's probably have a tube of it right here, right next to me.
Amazing.
You've got to keep this as the look. The look's got to be kind of the look that it has here. If you're gonna really spend the time, you can layer this out forever. Geez, a hand just reached in and laid out more green for me.
Aren't you lucky?
I am lucky.
And nothing fell over.
Yet.
Do you prefer safflower oil to linseed oil? And why?
Yes.
Why?
I don't know. I've used them both, and I just like the feel of safflower oil. Both are great. And, you know, the reason I tried safflower oil in the first place is we had some Winsor Newton people come to the academy where I teach and give a talk. And they talked a little bit, part of their talk was on mediums. And one of the things they said is that safflower oil is actually the best medium they say is cold pressed safflower oil. If you ever can find it, it's more expensive. I've tried it. I don't notice a big difference. And it has a little bit to do with color. It's the least, it affects your color over time the least out of all the various mediums.
What about walnut oil?
But walnut oil is, they say, second best.
Yeah.
And for years, I used walnut oil. And finally, I started using safflower. Walnut oil, the only thing I don't like about walnut oil, some of you may have already found it, is it tends to dry really shiny. And so safflower oil doesn't. I don't know if that's good or bad. Okay, overall, it's very loose, but it's beginning to shape up. Let's go back on the Bougainvillea itself. I'm going to use another brush, and I'm going to take the quinacridone and the white together. And I need to put a lot of medium into it because I'll tell you why. And I could use a knife even though I'm laying on very wet paint now. And if it's too dry, it's not going to work. So we want to, hopefully you can see it's quite a bit brighter. And what you're doing is you're adding life and light. Remember what I said earlier about turn the lights on? That's the same thing that I'm hopefully beginning to do now. So they're in there and they're kind of not lit to the same degree that they would be. So now I'm actually adding light and I'm hopefully getting them to read a little bit. I'm probably exaggerating a little bit. I'm going to stand back. That's okay. Just wanted to see where I was at. A little bit more red into it now. And I want to overlap some of that foliage because it's in front of the foliage. So that's why I wanted to get that foliage in there before I finished any of this. Turn your brush around, use different parts of it. Vary the reds a little bit. I added a little bit more red to it. We'll kind of go back, let's push it back into this color a little bit. It's even back hidden a little bit in here. See a little bit of it sneaking back, and it's just smearing it right into the color that's there. That's all I'm doing. Not doing anything else. Nothing outrageously tricky. Also, if I make it bright enough, it stands out against that dark beautifully. You guys can see. And if I get it too bright everywhere, I just added more of the straight alizarin into it now, because I want a little bit. And I have way too much light in here. I can see, so we want to kind of let this Bougainvillea kind of come over it back into this area. I'm going to go a little bit more of the, and we'll take it up in here, so it's a little bit darker red. A little bit of a brighter red, a little brighter up in here, kind of bring it over the roof a little bit more. feels like it needed some bigger masses, and I was doing too many little picky things. It feels okay. Am I thrilled with it? Not really. I think it has kind of what I want it to, but okay. I got to leave that alone because I'm not going to get it done otherwise. We've got to get some more texture, foliage texture back in here. Okay. Also, let's grab, where was that brush I was using there? Rosemary long bristled filbert here. Dark. So it's green and brown together.
Egbert type.
It's an egbert, yeah. I don't know if rosemary refers to those as eggberts. When I first started using them, I learned them as eggberts. And then when I learned that rosemary had them, I liked the quality of their brushes so much better that I ended up getting some of their, and I think they refer to them as long, and I know other makers, many of them refer to them as long bristled filberts. Okay, now I've got enough stuff in here that I think I can work two ways with it. Number one, I can paint some negatives. And for that, we're going to paint a little bit back in here, a little bit there, using a kind of yellow-green, kind of muted yellow-green that I already have mixed up. Don't like that at all. That feels better. I'd rather overpaint it too much. What was the question?
Did you say that was a number 8? I was just trying to.
This is a number 6. Okay. Got one part. What? You can still see more negatives. So I'd rather paint too many of those. Then I'll paint the leaves back in.
So you're just laying paint on top of it.
I'm just looking at kind of the busyness, the overall busyness of an area, trying to capture the essence of the feeling of those silhouettes of leaves. So now I just mixed up a brown and a green together because I'm going to use the dark, and I'm going to come over and actually paint the leaves. I painted the negatives. Now I'm going to paint the positives. And so you want to be a little bit more finesse oriented when you paint the positives over. You want to, in other words, with that stroke, you want to characterize as accurately as you possibly can the feeling of that leaf. And it's just a matter of the way you use your brush and having the right medium on there. You can't make more than about 2 strokes because what happens is you just pick that other color up and you start lightening the color and contaminating it. That feels good. Okay. Geez, I'm actually happy with something. Kind of makes me surprised when I do that. Now I see some more darks. So abstractly, just kind of hit that. Let it push its way into that other color, and then you can bring that color, if you have to, back on top a little bit. And in doing so, you build the appropriate character and of that particular area without over defining it. There are, and time permitting, I would probably switch over, and I just grabbed one because it was handy, one of my little liners, and we'll put a couple of these tree stems in there. You need that kind of believability thrown into an area. And I kind of overpainted some of this, so we'll come back in and do a little bit more in there. So you're building. Now, another thing that I want to get is down in the kind of 10 minutes. I'm going to finish it in 15 because I got to get this door in and finish this area up here. So we're going to add some of them that are in shadow. We're going to bring a little bit out in the light here and there. So a little bit up in here. Character up in here. Some of them come out into the light, just the green comes out in the light, and so I'm going to bring that green out a little bit more, right about here, not a little bit more. Bring some more Naples yellow light into it. We'll brighten it up right down in here. And then we'll bring some of those little pink flowers. And they look like they're about here. I'm just really quickly guessing. And then they go back into shadow. As I move into the darker greens, goes back into shadow a little bit. I always like to paint the shadow and then add the lights. So like I told you, turn the lights on. It's a little, I'm a little whiter. I don't want these flowers to look like the Bougainvillea flowers. And let's get that one plant in that I was talking about earlier. And I'm going to use let's use this. This is one of these evergreen brushes. White. You got to have a lot of medium on your brush. And let's see what we can do. Little color variation. So mix a little bit of sienna into it. And some of them overlap. Some of them get lighter and go right over. Got to add a lot of medium to this now. Right, come right in there. Whoops, still not enough. My God, didn't get it light enough. Let's try it again. That paint's got to be a lot wetter. Just not getting there. There we go. We're starting to get it now. Need to overlap. There's a little bit of it in here. I want a little bit of that character right here. And I'm going to go from here. I'm going into the door. And then we need some darks back in there to make that work. This is where I might use my liner, just so I can get narrower strokes. All right. I am going to, if I can, let's see if I can do it with a flat. I'm going to put the darks in the door. I think what I'm going to do is do a little bit of drawing first. By that, what I mean is I'm going to do a little bit of the, not dark enough. I mean, it's not, there we go. I'm just using brown and blue that I already have mixed up. Brown meaning asphalt, and I already have a dark mixed up, so I'm not even mixing up a new dark. That's the top of the door. A little bit of information in here. And the side of the door. Now we're going to indicate the windows, the dark windows. It's pretty dark. So I just added the blue and brown together. There's 3 of them. So I'm going to put the middle one in first. 1, 2, 3. And we'll put the second layer in. 1, 2. I don't like it. Let's do it that way. 3. And there's a third layer that kind of disappears behind the bushes. So I would probably need to add those bushes back in a little bit. Look at 1, 2, 3. So we get the feeling of that door. It's not as refined as I want it. Sometimes I like it like that because it's it feels more like a painting. And not like I've tried to paint perfect windows. And I'm not using that as an excuse, just so you guys know. Because very often you can say, well, I wanted it that way. I actually didn't want it that way, but now that I painted them in that way, I like the way it works. There's a sign up above it. Let's get that in. Well, I had some residue light paint on my brush, so I darkened it. There we go. Get that little sign in there. Now I'm going to clarify some things. I'm going to clean this area up a little bit. Clean that edge up. All right. Back on the other side, there is light on a bush. There's so much going on here. Let's get some yellow and white into that green, and let's kind of a little piece of light back in here. So this is what I call impressionism, you guys. It's very, very quick and indicative. That's probably the best word. Bottom of the window, right about here. So let's put the bottom of the window, get the centerpiece in that window. It's in shadow, so it's not, and we get a little bit of light sneaking in here and a little bit on the top. Don't want to go too far with it. Right about there. Kind of clean that up. All right. Now let's amplify the lights. The last thing I'm going to do is put a little bit of a light on this ground, by the way. But I want to amplify the lights on the building itself, because that's my that's what we're looking past all this gobbledygook here, and we're looking back at this area. So I went a lot lighter. Naples, and a lot of Naples into it because it's sunlight. So just the stronger lights. If it's not sticking, I add medium, which I just did. I see it right here. I see it get brighter down here. Kind of works its way up in here, but it kind of works its way into these other colors. So it's not as bright. So as I push it back into that paint. All right, now let's take that same concept, bring it on down. Clarifying that. So we clarify and refine at the end. I don't know if you guys, am I blocking?
A little bit. Yeah.
We're in here a little bit. Not quite as bright. So I mixed another color into it. Just kind of a muted nothing, but just so it isn't quite as bright as it is over there. Is it there? There. Down on the pillar. Back in this part of the pillar. A little bit up in here. As it goes down behind. And I can take the brighter color, meaning the white and Naples. And we can start to hit a little bit brighter here. Here. And I'm going to be a little bit delicate if I can and get it back there, back further here. It comes down here and down here. So what we're doing is pretty much strengthening those little lights, and then I can get a little bit back on this wall. So we get the nice dappled kind of feeling going on in here. The other thing I like to do I got about 5 minutes, is I want to be able to go back into the shadows a little bit. And I see a little bit of brick feeling right in here. So we'll just gotta keep the paint wet enough so it'll sit on top right there. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we're gonna put some textures up in here too. If I can get this. I don't like that brush. Okay. Mixing different colors, just going at and adding, and you can add as much of this as you have time for. This is the kind of thing, the honest God truth is, if I could easily go back and spend a couple hours just dealing with all of this kind of stuff. It's fun. You do it, you step back, you see how it's going. If it's going okay, keep going. If it's not going okay, do something else. But I've got the character of that going on. I still don't have all this character going. I might be able to pull that out at the last minute. I want to get a little bit, I didn't do it earlier, but I want to get a little bit more on this, on the tiles. That's a little bit lighter than I wanted. I just use the shape of that brush and let it do the work for me. I just want it to not feel as empty as it was when I first laid it in. There's a little in shadow light area up above, and it kind of helps define the tiles. You guys can see it, but boy, if you do enough, you can really pull it off quickly. There's also a little dappled light, and I mentioned it earlier and I almost forgot about it, and it happens right here. Oops, I don't want to quite that orange, so I put some more ochre into it. That feels a little bit better, maybe a little more white and ochre. A little lighter than I wanted, but it gives you the right feel. Let's put the light on that ground plane in the foreground. Bigger brush. It's really bleached out, not a lot of color in it. Slightly warm because it's sunlight. So a lot of Naples. I have a lot of green in this brush, so I have to kind of counter it with some orange and Naples. I'm going to test. First thing I'm going to do is test it right about here. I can live with that. That's good enough. Light looks like it kind of comes from here. Oh, I like that. It's creating the dappled look that I see in the buildings. A little bit lighter, but not quite as red as I had it, but a little bit of it back in here. Wow, it's a little too strong. I was trying to tone that down. There we go. And then it gets slightly stronger as it comes out. No, that's okay. Let's bring that up a little bit here. And I don't like the way that stops so abruptly, so I'm going to add some character back in there. Last thing I'm going to do, I think, is add, where are we at? Just about almost 5 minutes over. So we're going to punch lights. Not enough. I'm using a lot of the warm white, and I throw a lot of medium back into it. And I'm going to push some of your brighter, thicker lights here back on this plant, just using little pieces of the paintbrush. I can see that I can get a little bit more color right in here. And the darker shadowy greens against this, not dark enough. More green and brown, try it again. That's too brown, more green. That's what happens, you go real fast.
One thing I wanted to know how wet the underpainting is.
How wet the underpainting is. I'm not sure, everything's wet.
Yeah.
I've worked on this for about an hour and a half, so everything's wet. There's nothing that's not wet, let's put it that way. Now, am I satisfied with it? I think I could push those a little lighter. So with the brush that I've got in hand, yellow, white. Let's see what happens. And I could be using a knife and probably get it to lay on better. But if I add enough of the solvent-free gel medium, that'll do the trick too. Get the flavor of that. Well, I've got that color mix up. Just look down in here and say, where else can I can see a little bit of light in here. And just, all I'm letting this do is just the tip of this brush do the work for me. I'm really not working very hard at it. I'm just letting, my paint is wet enough, first of all. My paint is wet enough where I can actually just let my brush barely touch down. And it will give me what I'm after, providing the paint is wet. If your paint is not wet enough, you're not gonna be able to get it. Like that, my paint is almost too wet and I'm getting globs. Last but not least, if I can do it with a lot of, I added terp this time.
Why?
Because I need paint that is more wet and not as thick. Terp will, see, look, I'm coming over at the right time though, because it's wet enough. Whoa, I don't like that at all. Little finger sometimes does the trick. All right, let me add some more crazy lights up in here. Kind of like the looseness. I don't generally paint quite this loose, but there's aspects of it I'm happy with. I don't like that. I think what I need to do is probably white, yellow, and let more of the lights of the foliage kind of interfere and overlap that background. And there's you know what I missed? Hang on. God darn it. There's a ground plane back here. Right there. Right there. And it goes there and then it picks up over here again. Now, what do I got to do to make that sit back there? Just bring foliage in front of it. Now, if I do it right, it'll sit back. If I do it wrong, it won't. Like I said, this is a little looser than I usually paint. So there's parts of this that I'm very happy with, parts of it that I know I can improve upon. Don't know how much I'm going to be able to improve upon today because we're not going to be around delivering some artwork to a gallery in Santa Barbara. Just have fun. I hope that works for you guys. Most of it works for me. Most of it. There are parts that I think I'm off in. I think I'm off right here because this post, this should come out further. So this post should probably be over about in here. See that? Just move it over. Just do that. And come back with a little bit more Bougainvillea right in here. And dark leaves right over it. And you got to have a dark on the far side of it gotta have a dark back here. So we just take your brown, blue, and add that dark back in. So you move, in a way, I move something around. So you got a chance to see a little bit of that. Anyway, I hope that gives you a little bit of an idea as to how you take and clarify something that is not as clear as it should be. You know, I got that up too high because that door would be really short there. It's pretty easy. And that's because I judged quickly. But if it was probably down about in here, that ground plane would be down about in that area. So it's just a matter of moving a couple things around. So the ground plane is probably going to be more like here. And that gives you an approximation of pretty much what I wanted to achieve. Boy, I would love to be able to go out and work more on it, but and maybe I will later in the week. In any event, hope you guys got some information out of this. It's, for lack of, I would call this clarifying chaos.
It's kind of the story of your life.
Yeah, that is. Did you hear that? Anna just said it's kind of the story of my life, which there's too much truth in that.
Just kidding.
In any event, paint well. I felt like I was really pushing, and this is thicker paint usually. That's too strong, so I'm going to get rid of some of that crap. Okay, finger paint now. Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks for watching. See you next week. Okay. Thanks,
See you
Tim.
guys next week.
All right,
problem.
thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Great week. Stay.
You too.